Millionaire woman marries dishonored soldier. What he shows her makes. Her regret, her arrogance. Penelope Ashworth had never been denied anything in her 28 years of privileged existence. Born into the fifth generation of a pharmaceutical empire worth $3 billion, she commanded respect through inheritance rather than achievement. Her penthouse overlooking Boston Harbor, her collection of vintage sports cars, and her position on various charity boards were all reminders of a power she had never questioned until the day she met Captain Marcus Sullivan. The encounter happened at a Veterans Affairs fundraising gala at the Four Seasons, an event Penelope attended more for social positioning than genuine concern for military families. She moved through the crowd with practiced grace, her emerald Valentino gown and grandmother's diamond necklace announcing her status to everyone present. Marcus stood apart from the other attendees, positioned near the silent auction tables but clearly not participating. His dress uniform bore the insignia of the 82nd Airborne, but something about his posture suggested a man carrying invisible wounds. Unlike the other veterans present, who wore their service with obvious pride, Marcus seemed almost apologetic about his military bearing. Penelope's initial interest was purely superficial. Marcus possessed the kind of rugged attractiveness that her social circle would find amusingly exotic: broad shoulders, weathered hands, and intelligent green eyes that held depths her usual companions lacked. She approached him with the confidence of someone accustomed to immediate attention and deference, but Marcus's response defied her expectations entirely. When she introduced herself, expecting the usual recognition and subtle flattery, her name commanded, he simply nodded politely and returned his attention to a memorial display honoring fallen soldiers. His dismissal was so complete and natural that Penelope found herself momentarily speechless. Her pride stung by his indifference, Penelope pressed the conversation. She made casual inquiries about his service, his current employment, and his connection to the fundraising cause. Marcus answered with military brevity, revealing only that he had served 3 tours in Afghanistan, been medically discharged the previous year, and now worked security at a veterans shelter in South Boston. What struck Penelope most forcefully was Marcus's complete immunity to her usual arsenal of social weapons. Her family name, her obvious wealth, her carefully cultivated charm, none of it seemed to register with him. He treated her with the same respectful distance he might show any stranger, neither impressed by her status nor particularly interested in extending their interaction. This indifference ignited something competitive and primitive in Penelope's nature. She had built her entire identity around being desired, envied, and pursued. Men competed for her attention at charity galas, business executives sought her approval for board positions, and politicians courted her family's political contributions. Marcus's disinterest represented a challenge she couldn't ignore. Over the following weeks, Penelope began what she privately termed a social experiment. She volunteered at the veterans shelter where Marcus worked, ostensibly to contribute to a meaningful cause, but actually to study him more closely. Her presence at the facility created obvious complications. Her designer clothes were entirely inappropriate for the environment. Her lack of practical skills made her more hindrance than help, and her patronizing attitude toward the shelter's residents generated tensions that Marcus had to constantly manage. But Penelope persisted with the determination that had characterized her approach to every previous challenge. She learned that Marcus lived in a modest apartment in Dorchester, drove a 15-year-old pickup truck, and spent his free time counseling veterans struggling with addiction and homelessness. His lifestyle was so far removed from her own experience that she initially viewed it as an elaborate performance designed to intrigue her. The truth proved more complex and troubling. Marcus had been dishonorably discharged from the Army following a court-martial for insubordination and assault. The details were sealed, but rumors suggested he had physically confronted a superior officer over the treatment of Afghan civilians. His military career, which had included 2 bronze stars and a Purple Heart, had ended in disgrace and legal proceedings that left him unemployable in any field requiring security clearances. For most people in Penelope's social circle, this information would have ended any romantic interest immediately. A disgraced soldier with no prospects and a history of violence was precisely the kind of association that could damage carefully maintained reputations. But for Penelope, Marcus's fall from grace only intensified her fascination. She began to view their relationship as a project of social engineering. Her wealth and connections could rehabilitate Marcus's reputation, secure him employment worthy of his obvious intelligence, and transform him into a suitable companion for someone of her standing. The prospect of rescuing him from obscurity appealed to her sense of power and control. Marcus seemed genuinely puzzled by her persistent attention. During their conversations at the shelter, he displayed none of the calculating interest that men typically showed when pursuing her. His questions about her life seemed motivated by politeness rather than personal ambition, and he never requested favors or suggested ways she might use her influence on his behalf. This genuine indifference to her wealth and status created an intoxicating dynamic for Penelope. For the first time in her adult life, she was pursuing rather than being pursued. The challenge awakened emotions she hadn't experienced since childhood: uncertainty, vulnerability, and genuine desire rather than mere social positioning. After 2 months of volunteering at the shelter, Penelope made her move. She invited Marcus to dinner at Mistral, one of Boston's most exclusive restaurants, ostensibly to discuss expanded funding for the veterans facility. Marcus arrived in his only civilian suit, clearly uncomfortable in the opulent surroundings, but maintaining his characteristic dignity. Throughout the evening, Penelope deployed every weapon in her considerable social arsenal. She spoke passionately about her desire to support veterans' causes, suggested specific ways her family's foundation could improve conditions at the shelter, and hinted at broader opportunities for Marcus to assume leadership roles in veteran advocacy organizations. Marcus listened carefully to her proposals, asking thoughtful questions about implementation and sustainability. But when the conversation turned personal, he maintained the same respectful distance that had characterized all their previous interactions. He thanked her for her interest in the shelter, acknowledged the potential value of her suggested improvements, and gave no indication that he viewed their relationship as anything beyond professional collaboration. Penelope's frustration reached a breaking point during dessert. Abandoning subtlety entirely, she made her intentions explicit. She spoke about her loneliness despite her privileged circumstances, her attraction to Marcus's integrity and strength, and her belief that they could build something meaningful together. Marcus's response shattered every assumption Penelope had made about their dynamic. He explained, with gentle but devastating clarity, that he understood exactly what she was offering and why. Her wealth, her social position, her ability to open doors. He recognized these as tools she used to control relationships and maintain power over others. But rather than being flattered by her attention or tempted by her resources, Marcus felt uncomfortable with the inherent inequality she was proposing. He had learned, through military service and personal tragedy, that relationships built on power imbalances inevitably corrupt parties. He valued Penelope as a person, respected her intelligence and passion, but couldn't accept the role of grateful recipient of her largesse. This rejection triggered something desperate and impulsive in Penelope's character. Rather than accepting Marcus's decision with grace, she made a proposal that surprised even herself. If he wouldn't accept her help or her traditional approach to relationships, perhaps they could try something different entirely. She suggested marriage, not as a business arrangement or social alliance, but as a partnership between equals. She would renounce any attempt to change or improve him, and he would accept her exactly as she was. They would build their relationship on mutual respect rather than mutual advantage. Marcus's shock at this proposal was evident, but so was something that might have been genuine consideration. Penelope pressed her advantage, arguing that both of them were damaged by their past experiences. She by privilege that had isolated her from authentic connection. He by service that had cost him everything he valued. Perhaps together they could find something neither could achieve alone. The proposal was impulsive, dramatic, and completely contrary to everything Penelope's upbringing had taught her about marriage as strategic alliance. But in that moment, faced with Marcus's continued resistance to her usual methods of control, she felt desperate enough to risk everything on a genuine gesture of vulnerability. Marcus's acceptance came with conditions that should have warned Penelope about the complexities ahead. He would marry her, but only if she understood that he brought nothing to the relationship except his commitment to honesty and mutual respect. His past would remain largely private until he chose to share it, and he would never accept financial support or social advancement through her connections. Penelope agreed immediately, certain that once they were married, she could gradually reshape the terms of their relationship to better suit her expectations. The ceremony was arranged within 6 weeks, a small affair at her family's estate in the Berkshires attended primarily by Penelope's social circle and a handful of Marcus's fellow veterans. The contrast between the two groups of guests was stark and uncomfortable. Penelope's friends and family members moved through the reception with barely concealed bewilderment at her choice of husband, while Marcus's companions maintained respectful distance from people whose lives they couldn't comprehend. But the wedding itself possessed a strange authenticity that surprised everyone present. When Marcus spoke his vows, his words carried the weight of someone who understood exactly what he was promising. When Penelope responded, her voice held emotions she hadn't expected to feel: genuine affection mixed with uncertainty about the future they were creating together. The reception ended earlier than Penelope had planned, with Marcus clearly uncomfortable with the prolonged scrutiny and his new wife recognizing his distress. As they retired to the guest cottage where they would spend their wedding night, Penelope felt a mixture of triumph and apprehension. She had achieved her goal of binding Marcus to her, but she was beginning to suspect that marriage to him would prove more challenging than she had anticipated. As they stood together in the cottage's rustic bedroom, surrounded by family heirlooms and wedding gifts that represented a fortune Marcus couldn't comprehend, Penelope waited for him to acknowledge the magnitude of what she had given him. She expected gratitude, deference, and recognition of the transformation she was offering his life. Instead, Marcus moved to the window overlooking the estate's rolling hills and began to speak in a voice that carried emotion she had never heard from him before. What he revealed would shatter every assumption she had made about their relationship and force her to confront the true meaning of honor, sacrifice, and redemption. Marcus stood silhouetted against the window, his broad frame tense with the weight of memories he had carried alone for over a year. The moonlight streaming across the Berkshire hills created shadows that seemed to dance across his face, emphasizing the lines that Penelope had attributed to normal military service, but were actually carved by experiences far more devastating than she had imagined. When he began to speak, his voice carried the measured cadence of someone who had rehearsed these words countless times but never found the courage to voice them. The story he told transformed everything Penelope thought she understood about the man she had just married. Marcus's final deployment to Afghanistan had been with a joint task force operating in Helmand Province, one of the most dangerous regions in the country. His unit worked closely with Afghan interpreters and local village leaders to identify Taliban insurgents and protect civilian populations. Among these local allies was a man named Khalil Ahmad, whose intelligence had saved dozens of American lives over 18 months of collaboration. Khalil had risked everything to work with the Americans. His cooperation with foreign forces made him a target for Taliban retribution, But he continued providing information because he believed in the possibility of peace and stability for his war-torn homeland. He had 3 young daughters and a wife who taught school in their village, and he dreamed of a future where his children could receive education and opportunities unavailable to previous generations. The betrayal came from within Marcus's own command structure. Colonel Bradley Hartwell, a career officer more concerned with his promotion prospects than operational security, began selling intelligence to Taliban contacts for substantial payments deposited in overseas accounts. Hartwell's information included the identities of Afghan allies, the locations of safe houses, and the timing of coalition operations. Marcus first suspected something was wrong when 3 separate missions based on Halil's intelligence resulted in perfectly executed Taliban ambushes. Each time, insurgent forces seemed to anticipate American movements with impossible precision. Marcus brought his concerns to his immediate superior, Major Patricia Reeves, who promised to investigate but took no visible action. The situation escalated when Halil's eldest daughter, a 12-year-old girl named Amara, who dreamed of becoming a doctor, was kidnapped by Taliban operatives. The message delivered to Halil was explicit: cease all cooperation with American forces or watch his daughter die, slowly and publicly, as an example to other potential collaborators. Marcus knew that standard protocol would require extensive consultation with higher command before any rescue operation could be authorized. By the time bureaucratic approvals were secured, Amara would almost certainly be dead. But Marcus also knew, through his own intelligence network among local contacts, exactly where she was being held. The warehouse compound on the outskirts of Lashkar was heavily defended, but accessible to a small, well-trained team. Marcus presented Major Reeves with a detailed rescue plan that could save Amara's life while capturing valuable intelligence about Taliban operations in the region. The Major promised to present the proposal to Colonel Hartwell immediately. Hartwell's response revealed the full extent of his corruption. Rather than authorizing the rescue mission, he ordered Marcus to cease all contact with Halil and withdraw American support from the interpreter's family. When Marcus pressed for justification, Hartwell claimed that Halil had become a security risk whose continued association endangered American personnel. Marcus recognized this as a death sentence for both Halil and his daughter. Without American protection, the family would be completely vulnerable to Taliban retribution. Amara would be murdered as promised. Halil would likely be executed as an example, and his wife and younger daughters would face unknown horrors. That night, Marcus made the decision that would destroy his military career and haunt him for the rest of his life. He assembled a 4-man team of soldiers who shared his commitment to protecting Afghan allies, equipped themselves with weapons and equipment obtained through unofficial channels, and launched an unauthorized rescue mission. The operation succeeded beyond their tactical expectations. They infiltrated the compound, eliminated 6 Taliban guards, and extracted Amara without losing a single American soldier. They also recovered documents and electronic devices that provided detailed intelligence about Taliban financing and operational planning throughout Helmand Province. But their success created an impossible situation for Colonel Hartwell. The unauthorized mission had exposed Taliban operations that his corruption had helped protect. The intelligence Marcus's team recovered included evidence of communication between insurgent leaders and someone within American command structure communications. That would eventually lead investigators directly to Hartwell's treasonous activities. Hartwell's response was swift and devastating. He accused Marcus of insubordination, unauthorized use of military resources, and conducting illegal operations outside the chain of command. Marcus and his team were immediately relieved of duty and confined to base pending court-martial proceedings. During the legal proceedings that followed, Marcus faced an impossible choice. He could defend his actions by exposing Hartwell's corruption, but doing so would require revealing intelligence sources and methods that would endanger other Afghan allies still operating in the field. The evidence needed to prove Hartwell's treason was classified at levels that made it inadmissible in Marcus's court-martial. Marcus chose to protect his sources rather than his career. He pled guilty to insubordination and accepted dishonorable discharge rather than expose the intelligence network that continued to save American lives. His sacrifice allowed investigators to build a separate case against Hartwell using different evidence. But Marcus's military career was already destroyed. Hartwell was eventually convicted of treason and sentenced to life imprisonment. But those proceedings occurred months after Marcus's discharge. By then, Marcus had already been branded as an unstable soldier who had endangered his unit through reckless actions. The full truth about his heroism and sacrifice remained classified, known only to a handful of intelligence officers who were forbidden from discussing it publicly. The personal cost to Marcus extended far beyond his ruined career. Khalil Ahmad and his family had been successfully evacuated to a refugee camp, but they remained in constant danger from Taliban agents seeking revenge. Marcus used his savings and military pension to support their relocation efforts, but bureaucratic obstacles and security concerns made their situation precarious. More devastating was the fate of Marcus's team members. Two of the soldiers who participated in the rescue mission struggled with the stigma of their association with his illegal actions. One developed severe depression and died by suicide 6 months after their discharge. Another turned to alcohol and drugs, destroying his marriage and relationship with his children. Marcus carried the weight of these consequences daily. His heroic actions had saved one innocent life but cost him everything he valued: his career, his reputation, his sense of purpose, and ultimately the lives and well-being of soldiers who trusted his leadership. The medals and commendations he had earned in previous deployments felt meaningless compared to the destruction his final act of moral courage had caused. This was the burden Marcus brought to his marriage with Penelope. Her wealth and social position were meaningless to him because he had already sacrificed everything that truly mattered for the sake of his principles. Her attempts to rescue him from obscurity ignored the fact that his current circumstances were the direct result of choosing honor over personal advancement. As Marcus finished his story, the cottage fell into profound silence. Penelope sat motionless on the edge of their wedding bed, her elaborate gown suddenly feeling like a costume from a different world. Everything she had assumed about Marcus's lack of ambition, his contentment with modest circumstances, his apparent gratitude for her attention had been completely wrong.
Thank you for watching this story unfold with us here on M&A The Story Unfolds. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new tale. We'd love to know where you're watching. Leave a comment below and tell us what part of the world you're joining us from. Your support means everything. See you in the next story.